Hi, and welcome to English 1310. I am your professor, Stephanie Todd, and I just want to take a minute to introduce you to the class and a little bit of an overview of what you can expect this semester. English 1310 is Values in 20th Century American Fiction, which means that we read American short stories and novels from the 1900s or the 20th century, and we investigate what those texts can teach us about American values. So, a lot of the texts present values like the American dream, the pursuit of happiness, freedom, democracy, equality, justice, injustice, and these texts kind of provide us with some insight about what we can learn about those values in that particular time and space in American history. One of the things that I particularly like to do as we read these texts is really take some time to not only investigate the value that we find in the text, but also think about how what we learn in the text or how some of the themes that we learn about in these texts can still apply to us today. I love literature, obviously, or I wouldn't do this job, and I appreciate the sort of aesthetic value that literature has and the beauty that it can bring to our lives. But also, as a teacher, I find it really beneficial to us to think about what we can learn from the texts themselves, apart from just the sort of aesthetic components. That is, how can we take some of the themes and messages that we find in these texts and apply them to our lives, find useful information for us as, humans who live in the 21st century in America, and how can we learn something from a text that was written, 100 years ago? What value does that add to our lives? So this course in particular, the kind of central theme or the central value that we look at is the pursuit of happiness, right? This is part of the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness that is at the core of our American identity. And so, what is that pursuit of happiness that we're looking for? I would argue that in the 21st century, most of us are not very happy. As a culture, America is pretty low on the happiness scale, and really rates of anxiety and depression have doubled just in the last 40 years since the 80s. So how is it that we are really searching and yearning for this pursuit of happiness, and yet we're getting it so wrong? What are we missing? And what can we learn from these texts in the 20th century? How can we sort of take a look back through our history and through the literature of these various time periods and try to glean some understanding of what we're getting wrong and or what we could be getting right? So that's sort of the central value, that pursuit of happiness that we'll look at. But of course, in relation to those, we look at other American values in different texts. So we'll look at, the idea of the American dream and opportunity, and that pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality in the first unit. In the second unit, we'll look at systems of privilege and oppression and equality and inequality and how all of that impacts our sort of happiness and our access to the American dream. And then finally, in our third unit, we'll look at literature that kind of explores diversity and multiculturalism, the value that we have, kind of the American melting pot idea of the 20th century. And so, but with each of those different units and each of those different texts that we look at, we'll always kind of be returning to this idea of what are we learning about the pursuit of happiness. So that's kind of a general overview of what the semester will look like as far as the values and the themes we're pursuing. You'll have readings in each unit, and at the end of each unit, you'll have a take home essay exam that kind of asks you to consider what we've discussed in that unit and reflect on that with an essay. You'll have one sort of big analysis, historical and cultural analysis paper that you'll do that we'll work on throughout the semester. And then you will have weekly discussion boards where you engage in discussion about the texts each week with your classmates. As I said, these texts, we don't really read them in a vacuum. I'm really sort of emphatic about making these connections. So, in addition to the primary text that will read the short stories and novels, you'll also be reading a variety of articles, and we will have sort of optional weekly class discussions. I'll provide a little bit more detail about those in our get together this week, our sort of informal online Zoom session. Because this class is an asynchronous online class, no class sessions are required. You are not required to attend any class sessions, but I have these sort of weekly optional class sessions for those of you who would like to join. So hopefully you can all attend the first one this week. The information about that is in the week one announcement, and I'll provide you more info there about these sort of weekly class meetings that you're able to attend. So anyway, I hope you have a wonderful first week of class. Welcome to the course, and I look forward to getting to know each of you this semester. Take care.